So let's take a moment to set our motivation. And just notice where we are. I assume that all of us are indoors somewhere. We're under shelter. If you're far enough north, the heat's probably been turned on. We've eaten at least once today. Maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times, maybe more. All of us are wearing clothes, I imagine, as well. And we're healthy enough, well enough to be able to sit up and take part in sharing the Dharma. So all our basic needs are well cared for. And how did that happen? Where did our food come from? The clothing, the heat, the building itself. All from other beings. Every basic pleasure that we enjoy through the day all came about through the efforts of others. So for sure, we are also reaping the benefits of the past actions of some being who is a part of the continuity of his consciousness. So it's also our own positive karma ripening in these ways. But in a very practical and real sense, it's all due to the efforts of others that we're enjoying this experience right now. Many, 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 many other beings in all different realms do not have the luxury that we're experiencing. Hungry, thirsty, cold, adrift, homeless, not physically healthy or well, perhaps in great pain. So we can think with tremendous gratitude about the situation we're in right now, and really cultivate a wish to repay the kindness of the beings who have made all of this possible for us. And then the other thing that's going on is that we're sitting to share the Dharma. Also a rare opportunity that is easy to take for granted, but does not come about without us creating the causes for it to happen. So as we think about the kindness of all the beings around us, all the beings who have made it possible for us to be here tonight, just let a strong wish to repay that kindness rise up in you. I wish to really share all of the benefits of sharing the Dharma with them. To think about the unsatisfactoriness of their lives and let compassion arise. And then on that basis, as we talk about the practice of giving and taking, let's just make a firm resolve that we will do our best to repay the kindness by cultivating our love and compassion, by cultivating our bodhicitta, to make a determination to relieve all these kind beings of all of their suffering, and that we'll do it by becoming Buddhas. as it's the only way that we know of to be able to relieve them from their suffering and really ultimately repay their tremendous kindness. Imagine the room that you're in just filled with beings whose kindness you wish to repay. Imagine the room filled with beings with whom we'd like to share the Dharma. And we'll spend this hour together for their benefit and for the benefit of all beings. So Venerable Chödrön is not here tonight. She's at a monastic conference, which is something that really brings her a lot of joy. She's been going for many, many years. It's a conference of Western monastics. And so I drew the lot to share the Dharma tonight, which I was happy to do. I've been, and we all have, I'm sure, been thinking about Venerable Chödrön's teachings on the practice of giving and taking, which to me has just been enormous. I don't think I've ever had such extensive teachings on this practice. And so as the weeks have gone by, I've done little bits of the homework for the week, but I just felt like the more she taught, the more expansive this practice was becoming, and I wanted some way to kind of bring it back to something I could get my arms around and get my mind around. So what I want to do tonight is review the whole teachings that she's been giving on the giving and taking practice and kind of put it in a sort of an outline form so that all of the many, 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 many pieces, there are so many meditations in this in these teachings, we could spend years, which is the point, I think, spend years doing this practice, but to bring it somehow into a line so we could figure out how we could spend years doing this practice, because there's so many pieces to it. I was a little bit surprised when I went back to review that she actually taught this practice over 7 weeks. So I am reviewing June 18th, June 25, July 3, August 5th, August 13th, and August 20th. I guess that would be August 6th. So if you're following along in your notes, those are all the weeks I want to try to cover. And so to put it in the context of the text, we're working with some new people tonight. We're teaching from Mind Training Like Rays of the Sun, that Venerable's been teaching on for, a year and a half, I suppose, at this point. Really thorough exposition of this text. So the place we are in the text is in this outline under Cultivating the Conventional Awakening Mind. So we've gone through the actual cultivation of awakening mind concerned with the interest of others. And the first part of that is appreciating the value of the awakening mind, or bodhicitta. So we're all teachings on that. And then there's this topic, next part of the outline, the actual techniques for cultivating the awakening mind. So we're here with that. So we've gotten teachings on exchanging self and others through acknowledging the faults of selfishness and the advantages of concern for others. So that whole thing about the self-centered thought and how it's the cause of all our problems, and looking again and again and again at that, the trouble that it makes, the misery it makes in our lives, and looking at the value of cherishing others more than ourselves. So then the next part was what is to be given up by contemplating the disadvantages of self-centeredness, which of course is a self-centered thought. So we talked about that for a number of weeks. And then the next part of the outline is what is to be put into practice through contemplating the advantages of the concerns for others. So what's to be practiced while we try to seek the benefit of other beings? There was a little subhead, meditating on the great kindness of all beings, so that we have some appreciation and love. We see them as lovable. And now is the big heading, actually cultivating the awakened mind concerned with the interests of others, with a meditation on love and a meditation on compassion. So that's the big picture outline of where we are in the text. And this meditation on love and meditation on compassion is where the practice of giving and taking comes in. The practice of Tonglen. Tong meaning to give, Lin meaning to take in Tibetan. So what are we giving? We are giving love, our body, our possessions, all our merit, our virtue. And what are we taking? The suffering of all sentient beings. Who are we giving it to? All sentient beings. And even the holy beings, in some of the cases of this. So, the how and why of this, I've been reading a lot of things from His Holiness the Dalai Lama lately, and I'm impressed with how much he talks about imagination being a very special human faculty. That it's a very, very important aspect of a human mind, and kind of the gift that we have that other realms don't have. He cites animals. I don't know about beings in the... I don't know if hungry ghosts have much imagination, but for sure human beings have, and clearly it's the imaginative power of human beings that has propelled our technological advances from the Stone Age. You know, I mean, it's really clear that that's a part of what we progress along with. So he also says that is a very, very important part of our spiritual development as well, to be able to use the imagination, the imaginative faculty. And much of the Tibetan system that we're learning is about changing the habits of the mind, you know, changing how we think. So it very much applies the imagination to be able to retrain our ways of thinking. And he used an example which I think was really quite wonderful. He talks about how to prove the value of imagination and how it manifests things in our lives. He said, imagine that, you know, the first time you want a new car, you just sort of play with the idea. Oh, I'm ready for a new car. And then you start looking at cars on the highway and you think, oh, that would be nice. Or no, that one would be good. And then you start thinking about the color, and you know, you start kind of investigating what's the mileage, and you know, do I want a Prius or do I want to get something else? Or you know, all of this thought is just imagining ourselves with this new car, examining it in many, many different ways, until sooner or later you have a car. You've constructed the kind you want, you've constructed the color you want. They may or may not have that color on the lot, but you know what you want, you'll know what you're settled for. So all of this is done with our imaginative power. So the same thing, he says, is that if we can become equally familiar with compassion, for example, what are its advantages, how it can benefit us and others, where it will lead us, where it will take us, how do we cultivate it, why would we cultivate it? It's exactly the same process as envisioning our new car. And so when I look at all of the aspects of taking and giving, I really get how the imagination is so important in applying that imaginative faculty to this meditation, so that we can make it hugely expansive. And the more expansive it is, and the more familiar we are with these aspects of giving, and of giving our body, giving our possessions, giving our virtue, taking on the suffering of other living beings in all different kinds of ways, then the more familiar we are with the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattva. That's exactly what we're doing, is we're rehearsing to become bodhisattvas. In the same way that, you know, when you're a kid, you dress up in mom's high heels and parade around and rehearse to be whatever you were going to be when you grew up. So it's, so it makes this meditation, I think, quite enjoyable to be able to bring that imaginative faculty to all of the various elements of taking and giving that we can imagine. At the same time, you know, enjoyable in one way, at the same time, it really profoundly challenges our view of what happiness is. It profoundly challenges our self-centered thought that holds my happiness as most important, that holds my lack of suffering as the most important. It just flies right in the face of that, this practice. And that's what it's supposed to do. Venerable Chögyam said, the point is to be willing to give to all sentient beings because we have a strong altruistic intention and we see self-centeredness as the obstacle to our enlightenment. And so we use this practice to, I want to say smash, I guess that's true, to really smash the self-centered thought. Not to smash ourselves down, but to obliterate it and replace it with our altruistic intention, to replace it with our compassion and our great resolve to take on and liberate all living beings. So we practice that over and over and over again. We're creating the causes, she said, for being able to do extensive deeds without being terrified. We're creating the causes for tremendous courage. We're creating the causes to be able to act in any situation for the benefit of others by doing this in our imagination. That's very cool, I think. Imagining doing this makes us strong enough to reach out and help others and sets the stage for becoming an Arya Bodhisattva or a Buddha when we can manifest infinite aspects of ourselves and benefit beings infinitely. So it's, it makes absolute logical sense to do this practice. The other thing is that we need to accumulate, in order to become Buddhas, we need to accumulate the two collections, the collection of merit, the collection of wisdom. And merit, or virtue, is created through these extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas. So if we really want to attain full enlightenment, then we practice giving our everything in meditation. So how? There are some prerequisites to this meditation. All of the things that came before in this teaching, all of the preliminaries, thinking about everything from precious human life, death, and impermanence, all the way up to looking at the disadvantages of self-cherishing, are all to be thought through very thoroughly as the prerequisites for doing the taking and giving meditation. Or as it's presented here, the giving and taking meditation. The Venerable said, before you do this, you have to meditate on the disadvantages of self-centeredness and the advantages on cherishing others so that your mind is happy and you really want to give everything away. So if we use that as the criteria for the prerequisite to meditate on these things, so that till the point that we really want to give our body, want to give our possessions, and want to give our virtue, that's a lot of prereq meditation. So I think it's just like with everything else in the gradual path. We do it one step at a time, and then we do it all at once. We do all the steps of the path, but we do them one step at a time, like that. But one of the prerequisite meditations that she listed, which I thought was very helpful to do again and again, is make a list of the faults your self-centered thought has created in your life. I mean, we could spend, the list could be endless. Just make a list of the faults your self-centered thought has created in your life so that we can really see how that creates so much misery for us. And also, she said that by doing that meditation, we can separate ourself from the self-centered thought, which is also very, very important. To be able to recognize that the self-centered thought is an aspect of the mind, but it is not who we are. So that in wanting to overcome the self-centered thought, we're not doing it out of self-hatred. We're not doing it out of guilt or shame. Oh, I'm such a terrible, terrible selfish person, which I think is hard to shake. But we need to really spend some time thinking about how the self-centered thought is not the essence of who we are. That it is something that arises through causes and conditions and can be eliminated. And that all of the practices on developing bodhicitta are the method for elimination. And this taking and giving meditation, or giving and taking, this Tonglen practice really gets at the root of that self-centered thought and challenges it. So if we feel uncomfortable doing the meditation, that is good. It means that we're getting a little bit shaken in that self-centeredness. Before meditating on Tonglen, contemplate the benefits of love and compassion. So I wanted to just read what Nam Kapel says about that. Also, I was consulting with Geshe Tekchak's book in Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage, which has a very thorough explanation of this practice. It's different from the Nam Kapel's, but very similar. In fact, he uses the same citation for looking at the benefits, but there are several of them. But they cite the King of Meditative Stabilization Sutra. That says, were we to make as many infinitely huge offerings as the millions and billions of realms in the universe, and if we offered them forever to the Supreme Beings, it would not compare with a fraction of the mind of love. So if we made offerings to holy beings forever, that would be really great, but it would not compare for a fraction of the moment of the mind of love. Now, Venerable did point out that we're talking about samadhi on love. They don't think it's the mind of love like I have, which maybe is here for a split second and then gone. But that split second is what leads to being able to develop samadhi on love. Single-pointed concentration on that. So the Buddha said the merit created through love is far greater than that derived from constantly offering objects to the holy beings, and reaches far across the universe. So then they have many, many verses and scriptural sources to back that up. But this one verse is enough to get that if indeed we are holding Buddhahood as our goal, which also for most of us comes and goes, but as we continue to cultivate that altruistic intention, then the advantages then of meditating on love and compassion become clearer and clearer and clearer as we practice, so as we go along. So it seems that in the big picture of our practice, those meditations are the prereqs, and it might be also true within a given session, that if we're going to spend a session doing the taking and giving meditation, it's useful to run through a few of the disadvantages of a self-cherishing thought, a few of the advantages of cherishing others, the ones that really click for you. Run through some of the advantages of meditating on love and compassion, and that prepares the field. There is also the advice to do this practice slowly. Like it is, in its multiple mosaic complexity, I don't know how you could do it any other way. But both Alex Berzin and Geshe Tekchak too said it's something that you can really take your time with developing over a long, long time. That you can spend, obviously the way Venerable has been teaching this, you can spend months just on the giving in all of its various aspects. And then spend quite a lot of time on the taking of the suffering in all of its many, many aspects. And then it says at the very end, the idea of mounting the giving and taking on the breath comes only at the time when we are very, very familiar with all of the aspects of the practice. So we don't start out taking and giving on the breath. Although it's said that Lama Tsongkhapa was practicing this Tonglen with every breath that he took. So as an aspiration of something to be able to aspire to, it's really a beautiful image to make your whole, just the breath of your life is meditation on love and compassion through the practice of taking and giving. But obviously that would require a whole lot of familiarization with all the aspects and the parts. So Geshe Tekchak also says it's very good, there's so many parts to this, it's really good to do this on retreat. You have to take some time really developing it. So, the practice itself then has parts. In the version presented by Nam Kapel, he starts with giving. The version presented by Geshe Tekchak in Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage starts with the taking. So I don't know if one is better than the other, but giving is how we did in the way Venerable is teaching this text, so that's what we'll do. The basic steps of the three kinds of giving are all the same. So, we are giving to sentient beings our body. There's a whole extensive visualization around that. We're giving to sentient beings our possessions. Whole extensive visualization around that. We're giving to sentient beings our merit. A whole extensive visualization around that. Who are we giving to? We're giving to ordinary beings of all the 6 realms and the intermediate state. We're giving to the Arya beings. We're also giving to our teachers and the Buddhas. And then we're giving to the environments of all these beings. So this is kind of like the formula for all of the aspects. And then, what are we giving? So we give our body, we give our possessions, we give our virtue. But what does that mean to them? So in the practice of giving, for each of these things, it's using our imagination to give to them materially, to give to them whatever they would need emotionally or mentally, and to give to them all the conducive circumstances for practice. So we're imagining everything from, for example, we'll go through the list of who we give to, but beings in the hot hells, for example, we would imagine materially what would relieve the suffering of somebody who is in a hell realm. What would that be like? I always think of lemonade, something cool and soothing, but not stopping with the material, cooling down the environment, but then providing a situation for them to have a precious human life, providing a situation for them to meet with teachers, becoming the teacher itself, providing the opportunity to develop the freedoms and fortunes of the precious human life, providing the 7 Arya jewels that help ripen their minds, providing all of these things, and then seeing them become Buddhas. So we visualize the transformation all the way from relieving their immediate suffering to their complete Buddhahood. So that we practice again and again what it is that the Buddhas do, ripening our minds and leading us to enlightenment. Okay? So, then there's the list of who we give to. And this is also quite detailed, but it's the same list every single time, so consolidating. First, we give to the beings in the 8 hot hells. And for a real exercise in the imagination, I think reading Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, or actually reading Lamrim Chenmo, the explanations of the different kinds of hell realms, and all the different realms actually, are quite vivid. So you can spend a lot of time really thinking about the black line hell and the iron hell. I can't remember all the names of them, but there's the iron house with the fire coming out and the molten iron on the, what would it be like to be in that situation? And when we think about the hell realms, or any of these realms in particular, it's, some people have a real hard time with this. It calls into mind, for sure, the results of our karma, the results of our actions. And so you can say that they're states of mind, or you can say that they're actual experiences, either one. But as Venerable Children says, the people who are in those realms, for them, their experiences is as real to them as ours is right now. So we're in this human realm that looks really normal, and we can buy that one. We can believe that one. A little bit harder to imagine the other realms that we can't see, but imagining how it would be, and then thinking that we have the possibility for the causes of those things already in our minds. We have created actions in the past that are dire enough to lead us into a place of a hot hell. So it's useful to imagine even being in those situations and how it would feel, and then being able to give what would be soothing, what would be beneficial, both physically, as I said, materially at the beginning, and then what would then be able to lead beings' minds to change, to ripen the positive karma that's there, and to lead them to enlightenment. So we start with the 8 hot hells, then we give to the beings of the 8 cold hells, and they just whimper and cold, cracked from the cold. We give to the beings in the surrounding hells, like the putrid swamp hell or the forest of knives. Then we give to all the beings in the occasional hells. Then we give to all the hungry ghosts. And it says here there are 36 types of spirits. I don't know if you have the detail of going into all the 36 times, but for sure the hungry ghosts, who are the beings that are so, through their past greed and miserliness, have created the conditions under which they are perpetually thirsty, perpetually hungry, and their hunger and thirst can't be satisfied for a number of different ways. So it's a kind of a huge craving mind that can never ever be satisfied. So just imagining the suffering that is and what would satisfy it. How could we give things that would bring benefit to that mind? Then we give to the animals of all species. So you could spend forever imagining the fish, imagining the mice, imagining the worms, imagining the leopards, imagining the whales, imagining crickets. I mean, going on and on and on and on and on about getting inside the mind of that birth. What does that feel like? What kind of suffering is that? And what can I give to make that being happy? Immediately, temporarily, and then to lead them to enlightenment. We do the same thing with all the human beings throughout all the universes. So you can go through human beings in all kinds of ways. Human beings you know, human beings you don't like, family members, groups of professions, parts of the world, geographical areas, all kinds of ways to imagine human beings. And not just on this planet, throughout the universes. And we know the sufferings of human beings fairly well. You can imagine those. Then we give to the demigods, whose primary suffering is through their jealousy of the God realm. So what could we give? Then we go through the various God realms, the God realm of the desire realms, the gods that are completely satiated with sense pleasure, and whose suffering comes actually as they're dying. Their beautiful bodies lose their luster, they begin to smell, their flowers wilt, and their friends completely shun them because they can't bear to be near this ugliness that's happening with their friends. And the gods in their dying state can see where their rebirth is going to be, so they know they're going to fall. They know where they're going to go. That is a horrible kind of suffering. So, giving to them to relieve that suffering. Then the gods of the form realm, who have really subtle bodies. Gods of the formless realm, who don't have bodies. They're just in a mind state. But, as Venerable said, imagine the gods of the form realm who got there through intense meditative stabilization, but they didn't meditate on the nature of reality that would relieve them from all cyclic existence altogether. So imagine having the realization that you've wasted your meditative concentration for eons on something that did not liberate you. that's a major suffering. So how, what can we imagine giving that would be of benefit to those beings? Then we imagine all the beings in the intermediate state or in the bardo, beings that are right now between lives. Imagine their suffering, imagining their confusion, giving to benefit them, to relieve their suffering. Giving particularly to the beings that harm us, which is a whole other meditation that I want to get into a little bit, but purposely calling on humans and other spirits that intentionally that have a strong malevolent intent, and giving to them to relieve their suffering and to make them happy. Then we give to the so that's giving to ordinary beings. So then there's the class of giving to the beings who have achieved the path, or who are on the path, which means to the Aryas. Doesn't mean to Dharma practitioners ourselves, we're just ordinary. But to the hearers and solitary realizers, then to the bodhisattvas, then giving to your spiritual mentors, their lineage holders, all the Buddhas. And then we give to the environment. So that's a whole other class. Environments of all these beings. So that list is the same list all of the giving goes to, and pretty much almost all of the taking. So again, endless. We could spend months and months and years and years and years visualizing and cultivating these ideas about the sufferings of these various realms and what would make them happy. And imagine, and it's just, if so often, we see it here at the Abbey even, we're so caught in our own way of thinking, or our own little world, or our own little task of what's to do next, that we often don't notice a simple little thing we could do for somebody here that would make things easier. Even making sure people have prayers. It's just one of those things. So if to exercise the mind in imagining all of these different levels, realms of existence, and all the different ways that beings are suffering in those realms of existence, and just imagining what would be of benefit, just how practical that would be in exercising the muscle of helping others, of really learning to see what can be done to help. I think it would be tremendously practical for us. Okay, so that's the basic outline of that. Then we start with giving the body. So she outlined various techniques for how you'd give the body. One, and the one I've seen most consistently in the things that I was studying, is to imagine that the body becomes a wish-fulfilling gem. Your own body becomes a wish-fulfilling gem. And that you can emanate from that jewel everything that you're thinking the beings in those realms need. So if you're giving your body, for example, back to the hot hells, then you imagine that your body becomes the cool rain that falls on them. Your body becomes the lemonade that's sipping them, Your body becomes then the teacher that walks beside them and guides them, back from the mind of hell into a mind that recognizes the kindness in the world, or whatever. Your body becomes the Dharma text then that they study. So imagine transforming your body into the wish-fulfilling gem, and that's what's given. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to multiply the body as it is, as many times as you need to, and send zillions of copies of that yourself out to stand in front of each of these beings, and then you do become whatever it is they need by standing in front of them. Another way she described to give the body is to imagine the body dissolving into the four great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and also space. And as it dissolves into those elements, then everything in the universe is made up of these elements. So as your body dissolves, it goes to the beings that you're wishing to benefit and reconstitutes as the things that they need. Reconstitutes as the teachings, reconstitutes as whatever. She said when you're giving to your teachers, or also to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but especially to your teachers, you can do like it's described in the King of Prayers, of multiplying as many bodies as atoms of the world. And then on those bodies you can have many, many mouths, many, many heads, many, many arms and legs to do many, many prostrations. Multiply yourself many, many times to be able to help them with their projects. So definitely it stretches the imaginative faculty to think of your own body with many, many mouths and heads and doing praises and whatever. And she said when we make offerings, especially this is in the context of giving to our spiritual mentors and so forth, we're making a karmic connection. So when we make these offerings, it's like a connection with our teachers' lineages, with all the holy beings, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So to think of that too as we're multiplying our body to create this capacity. So giving our body is the hardest, the thing we cherish the most. The thing we're most, we feel like our body is us. So this practice of giving the body in all these different ways should really challenge our self-centeredness, should really give us a little bit of a gulp or choke. And then we have an opportunity to really think of the advantages again and to overcome that, to think about how much suffering that cherishing our body causes us, and using that thought to wish to overcome that clinging. This particularly came up in the section on giving to beings who harm us. It says, after imagining turning our bodies into the temporal needs for other beings, we summon all the harmful elements with the hook of our compassion, and we give them all they need. Develop a sense of deep closeness with them. The text says, so these are the beings who have really harmed us, the beings who frighten us, the beings we disapprove of. Venerable said the ones who creep you out. Human beings, other realm beings, our nightmare beings, the monsters of our dreams. We intentionally summon them by the hook of our compassion, with the thought that we've created the causes for them to harm us. Therefore, you can conclude that we have harmed them in the past. We've killed them for food, we've eaten their flesh, we've worn their skins, and we've harmed them. And so this makes us acknowledge the fact that we have done this kind of harmful action in the past, and that these beings are, or that really we owe them a huge debt. And so we offer the body for whatever they want. And the text is really graphic. Let those who want flesh have it. Those who want to gnaw bones, those who want to drink blood, let them have it. So they eat, being freed from hunger, thirst, and poverty, they are satisfied and have mental happiness. The altruistic intention is born within them, and the suffering in their mind ceases. Their minds of revenge are completely pacified. So this is one of the aspects of really cultivating a lot of courage, and being able to face the beings that we're most frightened of, acknowledge our debt, acknowledge their tremendous kindness, and being willing to generously offer whatever they want to do with the body. Venerable said, if you do this practice and you feel a little queasy, that's a good thing. You're getting the sense of the I and the mind. And then Nakaspel said that by doing this, bodhisattvas will expand their capacity limitlessly with little hardship. So it's again that gradual path, the gradual development of the familiarization of giving so generously. Then we go back through and do the same thing with the environments of all that list of beings. The hot hells, the cold hells, the occasional hells, la 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 la. So giving to the environment, why? Because when we give to the environment, the beings in that environment become happy. So it's like purifying every one of those environments and making it a pure land ultimately. So again, we give the body. What does the body become? It becomes, all the thorny, rocky places become smooth and beautiful and jeweled and flowered and perfumed, and all the, hot iron of the hot hells becomes soft and smooth and beautiful, and all of the cracked tundra of the cold hells becomes warm and lush and tropical, and why? Because we're given our body. Our body becomes that, and that transforms the environment. Then we give our possessions. Do the whole cycle again. Our possessions, the things that we own, things that we have, things that we love. So this, might be a little bit easier. We're not maybe as attached to our computers as we are to our bodies, maybe. But it also helps pry loose our attachment to the things that we enjoy. And so they too are multiplied, they are transformed into whatever the beings need on every level. And then we do the same thing again with giving away our merit. Which in a way is the scariest part, if you really think about it. Because everything good, everything pleasurable that we have has come about as a result of our positive actions. So in giving away our merit, giving away those causes for happiness and pleasure, that's giving away our future happiness, if you look at it from a frightening and stingy sort of place. The advantage, of course, is that dedicating our merit actually ripens it and increases it. But we need to be able to give it liberally. And they say that with body and material, we can only give what we have. So I can't give my past body of some past life. I can't give the tiger body I was. I have to give this one. But with our merit, we can give our merit of the past, present, and future. So we can give all of the aspects of what we will, the positive potential that we'll generate. And there's a prayer from a sutra that they say that may whatever sources of virtue I have be transferred into sustenance for all living beings. We're thinking about how our merit, all our positive potential, can be turned into the food, the clothing, the teaching, the teachers that would make sentient beings happy. Thinking, may our merit sustain them. May my merit be the cause of their enlightenment. So that was weeks and weeks and weeks on giving. Then there was a couple of weeks on the taking part. Then that's the meditation on compassion. And she cites Chandrakirti, who said, compassion alone is the seed for the conqueror's rich harvest, the water for the development, and the ripening. So in other words, enlightenment and all the Buddha's qualities are the harvest. And compassion is both the seed, the water that nurtures it, and then also the result of the whole thing. So how do we do this one? We start by thinking of others' sufferings and wanting them to be free of it. So to really spend time, you can spend whole meditation time just on that, on all the different ways that beings suffer, both in a gross way and the more subtle ways of suffering. You know, looking at the suffering of change or looking at pervasive suffering. Strip ahead here for a minute. So, thinking about all the suffering of sentient beings, wishing them to be free of it, that's what propels the practice. And then they say that it's best to begin the taking by first taking from ourselves. And if we think about even our own suffering in the future, it also helps to habituate the mind so that we become familiar with it and we're not so thrown, because it's definitely going to come. I mean, we can think about this, and so they talk about thinking about the suffering of this afternoon or tomorrow morning, thinking about the suffering of the next day, thinking about the suffering of our 10 years from now, our old age, even our death, and willingly take that suffering. Think about the suffering of our future rebirths. Meditate on that and being willing to take the suffering. So how do we do it? The usual way of doing it is to imagine that the suffering appears as like smog or smoke. Nam Kapel has a very interesting way of putting it. He had the visualization of the suffering falling in heaps of clumps of black hair. But I don't know, it didn't quite connect for me, and I don't think it really did as Venerable was talking either. To see it as clumps of black hair is not quite so pervasive as you can imagine smoke or smog. So basically, to see the suffering as smoke or smog coming from visualizing yourself first, or the other being as you get further along in the practice, coming off of that person, and that you take it in. You willingly take that smog upon yourself. You imagine that at your heart is your self-cherishing attitude, self-centered thought. Right there, connected with the self-grasping ignorance, and appears as like a rock in your heart, something very solid. And as you take that suffering in, the suffering of tomorrow morning, the suffering of old age, the suffering of a future bad rebirth, you take that in, it becomes like a lightning bolt and shatters the lump of self-centeredness and self-grasping at your heart. Just like blows it to smithereens. And where that rock was is the light of your compassion, light of your growing bodhicitta. So it's not like we take the suffering on and then like hold it and just stew it, or get darker and darker and darker and heavier and heavier and heavier and heavily depressed. Because what good is that? That's just martyrdom, which is not the point of this practice. That's a different thing. So it's really, really important to be able to see that lump destroyed, and that we think, in doing so, my own future lives will be happy, as will and as you're taking on the suffering of others, they too will be happy. So this act of taking on the suffering and having it blow this rock in our heart creates happiness for ourselves, creates happiness for the others. It's really important that we get to that step and that we rejoice about it. So we do that for ourselves. We can do it when we're sick. We can do it when we're feeling pain or discomfort. We can do it when we're finding ourselves resistant to something that we don't want to do. We can take on the suffering of ourselves. We can also then imagine taking on the suffering of all the other beings who are experiencing the same thing as you. Which then has the effect of taking the emphasis off of me at right that moment, and I realize that it's, this is for everybody. And then we go through all the realms, just like we did before with giving. So thinking about all the suffering of the hot hells, taking that on, letting it shatter the self-centeredness, blowing open to create the space for growing love and compassion. We again go through all the steps, through all the realms. Then we take the origin of their suffering, which is also a very important detail. So we're not just taking the manifest suffering now, but we're taking the causes of that suffering. We're taking the afflictions. We're taking the karma, the actions, negative actions that were done out of those afflictions. We take those seeds as well. And then as the smog or smoke comes in and blows the lump of self-centeredness at our heart, we think, my self-centered thought is eradicated, and so is my suffering of others, and so is the suffering of others. It's all gone. And really spend time thinking that all these beings are free from their suffering. So it's helpful as we're taking on the causes of suffering, we'll think about, all the different ways that our suffering gets caused. Helps us really think to see the afflictions as the enemy. And then we do the same thing, taking all the unsatisfactoriness from the environment. Think of all the impure realms or the 10 directions. And then visualize them being transformed into pure lambs is what we're doing. This is a practice for banishing fear, this whole meditation. When we look at the situation of others, we aren't so obsessed with our own. And when you imagine taking on the suffering of others, you make your mind very strong. So again, throughout the whole teaching, she kept going back to what are the causes for doing the taking and giving meditation? Understanding the defects of the self-centered thought, understanding the benefits of cherishing others. Over and over and over, needing to look at the disadvantages of self-centeredness and the tremendous benefit of cherishing others. So knowing this, what do? We resolve to give up the self-cherishing thought. We resolve to practice cherishing others. And then the whole thing, that section ends with a quote from Shanti Davis saying, if you don't equalize and exchange yourself for others, you won't reach enlightenment or even find happiness in cyclic existence. So that's pretty strong. I wanted to do one thing that, page 62, much of this practice, much of the how-to of this practice comes out of Shanti Davis' Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And he has these numbers of verses about giving his body, may I become these various things that are Venerable recommended as a way of thinking about how to give the body in order to benefit others. So we could work off the outline, or you could just work off these verses, imagining the body becoming this. So I thought it'd be nice to read the verses. This is in chapter 3 on Awakening Mind. During the intermediate eon of famine, may I become food and drink for sentient beings who are poor and famished. May I remain in their presence as various necessities. May I protect those without protection and be a guide leading those upon the path. May I become a vessel, a bridge, and a ship for those who wish to cross over the ocean. May I be an island for those searching for land, and a lamp for those needing light. May I become a bed for those who need rest, and a servant for all who want assistance. May I become accomplishing mantras and excellent vases, fabulous wish-fulfilling trees, and great elements such as the earth. May I be the basis of sustenance for limitless sentient beings, existing eternally for them like space. In this way, just as all realms of sentient beings are infinite like the expanse of sky, may I become the basis for their sustenance until they all attain the state beyond sorrow. So the practice of imagining our body, our possessions, or our virtue becoming the basis of the sustenance for all sentient beings helps us rehearse to become the minds of the Buddhas. Yeah. To practice the Bodhisattva deeds for as long as it takes in order to become Buddhas. So there was one last quote. May all my actions, such as seeing, hearing, remembering, touching, or even conversing, be of benefit to beings, and may I always work to give them peace. Really quite lovely. So, that is the collapsed version of 7 weeks of teachings on how to do this practice. I think it would make a great meditation manual to just pull these apart and start imagining all the ways to do it. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. It's really a glorious practice. And to have this kind of teaching is wonderful. It's just mind-boggling that we get to do it. So may we all practice well. So Venerable Children will be back next week. And it will be in the middle of the Abbey's 1-week retreat on Chenrezig and the 108 verses in praise of great compassion. So we'll have a room full.